But you tweeted something which I thought was really entertaining, and I actually thought it was a joke when you first tweeted it. It was somebody talking about their pronouns and trying to tell their child that it's he him, not she her. And I believe this was a biological woman. And you said that this is fiat-induced psychosis. Now, a lot of people refer to things like, let's just say, like a blue tick on Twitter as, oh, that's fiat, I don't want that. So that's sort of what I thought you were saying, but you actually mean it. This woke culture, this new wave of so-called progressive liberalism is fiat-induced. So can you go into more detail on how this wave of woke culture is fiat-induced?
Yeah, this is... admittedly, I'm kind of like at the edge of my own understanding about a lot of this, but one of the things Peterson highlighted years ago was that he was not going to give in to compelled speech. There were laws being passed in Canada that said you must call this person whatever gender they select for themselves. And through his studies of history, he knew once you started to violate the freedom of speech, you would now be on a slippery slope toward totalitarianism. And so I think there's something about, again, fiat existing in the world, and it's not just currency. People always, especially in Bitcoin, think it's just the money, but legislation by fiat, right?
What do you mean legislation by fiat?
The English common law tradition was originally, we would observe how people behaved over many long periods of time, how things had been resolved traditionally, and that discovery process would be implemented as law. It wouldn't be one guy sitting down writing a law saying this is law. It was an observational discovery process rather than a process of dictate, which is legislation by fiat. Do this or I'll hurt you. So, and like ancient Romans didn't even have a concept of that. They actually thought all law was basically natural law, and the job of the rulers was to discover this and codify it, not to sit there and write laws and tell people what to do. So again, we're sick. Like, we think this is how we have to do things. We need to coerce people into good behavior. And when you have that perspective in mind, you end up creating this fight where everyone wants to get on the side of the coercive apparatus to try and tell other people what to do according to their worldview. So everyone's trying to impose their opinions on others. And I think that this whole idea of pronouns, right? I'm a flag, I'm a chair, it gets absolutely crazy. And then if you don't remember my pronoun and use my pronoun, then I'm going to coerce you, I'm going to shame you, I'm going to cancel you. Like, this is asinine. That's all anti-free speech, right? If you ask me to call you the pronoun and you're my friend and you're nice about it, maybe we can mutually agree, and I'll agree to do that, sure. But to try and codify this, like actually bringing to bear legal compulsion on people that do not speak the pronoun that you wish to be called. I mean, this is like an adult playing imaginary, effectively. Like, I want to be whatever pronoun I've selected, and if you don't call me that thing, I'm going to hurt you. So they're like trying to impose opinion or impose imaginary play in the adult world. So I think this is all contributing to that psychotic behavior. And it sort of feeds back onto itself too, where it's like, if you do give into that coercion, then all of a sudden, like, you've been taken advantage of in a certain way, so you feel like you have to play that game. And it's just very psychologically, spiritually cancerous, in my opinion. And I think we need to be rid of all of it. We just need freedom, like mutual, consensual exchange across the board. We need to absolutely put that at the highest echelon of our value hierarchy and just respect and acknowledge that. Even in a purely economic sense, that's the only way you create value. Like this is called the inequality of exchange in economics. Two people only trade when you and I would only execute a trade if you think what I have is more valuable to you, and I think the same thing in reverse. I think whatever you have is more valuable to me than what I'm giving up. That's the only time we trade. So that when we both leave that trade, we've both produced a psychological profit. We're both better off. I got more value than I gave up. You got more value than you gave up. We increase the aggregate value, or at least the perception of value in the world. Only if it's mutual on both sides. If it's not mutual, then it's destructive, right? Someone's leaving that exchange hurt, basically. And so this idea of compulsion, coercion, imposition, I think it just needs to be wiped from human affairs completely.
The thing with that is that it becomes inherently political, because where there's people, there's politics, right? And I think freedom is just a political standpoint. If you take the 4-point spectrum, whether it's authoritarianism, liberalism, whether it's left, right, whatever it is. So a lot of people say that Bitcoin isn't political, and I understand that the technology isn't political, but what you're saying to me, and I entirely agree, is inherently political. It's libertarianism.
What's your definition of politics?
My definition of politics would be, well, it's a hard question. I think where there's people,
right?
Where there's people, there's
are
politics.
Obsessed with it, they can't define it.
That's a good one. Where there's people, there's politics, right?
Again, it depends on the definition. Here's 2 definitions that I've heard that I think make sense. One is something like the marketplace is the sphere of distributed cognition. So this is where people are trading with one another. We can all the information basically in the marketplace is contained in the price. So we're engaging, like our individual cognitive computational system is plugged into the market, which is like the minds of everyone else. So it's a distributed computing system. I've heard politics defined as the ethics of that system.
Right.
So there's a cognitive element, which is the distributed cognition of the market. Well, we also need distributed ethics put right on top of that. That definition of politics I can work with, right? Sure, we need some ethical considerations. We need to hash that out. We need to talk about it. The other definition of politics, which I think is much more apt to modern reality, is this idea of imposing your opinion.
Yes.
Right? We vote nationwide. 51% of the people decide they want this thing. Then the law is written by Fiat and imposed on the other 49%. Basically, that's coercion. That I think is nonsense. It's like just give people the ability to opt out, exit, say no. Then you are honoring their sovereignty. You're honoring individual decision making, and that leads to human flourishing, in my opinion. Value creation, capital accumulation, satisfaction of human wants. So, depending on how we define politics, I would agree with you. Wherever there are people, there are politics, in the sense there are ethics to this system of distributed cognition we have to engage in to be smart, successful, creating wealth, advancing civilization, frankly. But this other idea of politics where I need to shove my opinion down other people's throat because of, I don't know where people get it, honestly. I've never wanted in my life ever to like impose my opinion or control someone like that. I don't know where that comes from.
Your biggest problem then, as a freedom maximalist, and I feel your maximalist kind of says it all, really, doesn't it? Is the imposing, right? So sort of mandating something.
No coercion, no compulsion, no violence.
Okay. So this is interesting. El Salvador makes Bitcoin legal tender. And that's all very exciting. But some issues that I've heard people have, and this is something which is hushed away, right, and we're sort of not allowed to talk about, is legal the fact, tender. Yeah. So you have to use it. Well, you could use dollars as well, or not. You can use dollars as well.
I don't know.
Okay, but it has to be accepted because it's legal tender. So if you go to McDonald's and you want to buy a Happy Meal, whatever it is, you have to accept it. A private business has to accept it.
I disagree with that.
You don't. You disagree with?
I disagree with legal tender law completely, because it is coercion, it is compulsion. Even though it serves the adoption of Bitcoin, I still don't agree with it.
Why don't you think people talk about that?
I don't know. I didn't know people don't talk about that. I'll talk about it. I don't support it.